It's football season and time for the show that examines the X's and O's of the top games for the coming weekend. It's time for the Gridiron Breakdown.
It's time for the Gridiron Breakdown. I'm Jay.
And I'm Alan.
And football is finally here, Alan. The 2018 season is upon us. Week 1 games. We've done conference previews. We've given all kinds of speculation about this roster versus that roster, who's going to finish where. We've had coaching turmoil and drama the last couple of weeks with the scandals and stuff, but now we're finally ready to talk about actual football and pick some games.
Jay, college football season's here. It's like Christmas morning. If Christmas morning is 4 months long and ends with everybody in Lee County drowning their sorrows in cheer wine and sundrop.
Well, we're not the only ones that do that. So Lee County's not the only place where that might occur for sure. But yeah, everybody's hope springs eternal after spring games, right? And they build it up through the summer. And then for half of the country, crashing reality happens after the first week. But it is just 1 week, as Nick Saban would remind us all. It's just one game. But it can mean a lot, and there's a lot of big games on the schedule, man. I mean, college football has done a good job of scheduling good big game matchups the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. It used to be like the first week was just trash, and then the second week had a couple of good games, and then conference play started. Now you have all these feature out of conference games and interconference matchups and neutral site games, and then it used to be everything dropped off, but now this stretches on for a few weeks.
Well, and I think it's kind of the climate we live in with the college football playoff. You need to have a good schedule. And so teams are looking for those premier marquee games. And unlike in the past where the polls might have punished you, in the playoff it's been proven, Jay, you can lose a game and still get in. So I think teams are less afraid of having a big matchup in week 1 or week 2 against a really powerful opponent. They know, hey, we lose that game. If it's close, the committee will forgive us as long as we take care of business. It's made for a lot of good, exciting football and really more watchable football.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, we make fun at the end of every season about how the bowl season screws everybody out of interesting football, but they've gotten better the last couple of years, and now the beginning of the season is just as interesting. And just to give folks a little bit of a sense of how we do things on the Gridiron Breakdown, if they're new to the show here, each week Alan and I are going to pick 3 games out of the schedule that we're going to do a deeper dive on than others. So we call 2 of those the feature games of the week, and then we're going to pick 1 game of the week that we think's the biggest one out of all of them. Alan tends to talk about the defensive stuff. I tend to talk about the offensive stuff, but we swap that up a lot, right? I mean, we just go back and forth, try to give the key elements we think are important in the game, and then at the end, we give score predictions and who we think's going to win. We don't really do it by the spread so much, but we will mention that here and there.
Yeah, occasionally we bring Vegas in. They don't build those casinos because they lose money out there. So sometimes you can kind of see a smelly fish into the future if you really pay attention and know what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the fun part of this, is just to be able to look and see, what's new and what to look at again as you're going to watch college football, because everybody, piles in for this good long Labor Day weekend to watch a lot of football. I know I'll be doing it. You're going to be doing it. You've been to a lot of these neutral site games. I've been to a few of them too. Going to catch a game at a new school for me this fall too. So I'm just excited to have football back and have games to talk about, man. So what do you say we get right on into it?
Well, Jay, I got one question first. What's the over or under on chicken wings to be eaten at the Skipworth house this weekend?
The wife is not a fan of chicken wings, oddly enough. And since part of her job entails working at the game, we'll be consuming whatever the University of North Carolina Charlotte likes to serve at their stadium, which I think is a lot of Bojangles. So we'll see what happens. But looking forward to taking that in as the 49ers take on the Fordham Rams, New York's one true team. So let's get into feature game number 1, though, and this is a doozy, man. Arlington, Texas, LSU, the Ed Orgeron Fighting Tigers, taking on Mark Richt's Miami Hurricanes. Man, Miami had a big resurgence last year. Big 10-game win streak, dropped off at the end of the season, and no doubt about that, okay, but still a very respectable team, great defense, had a really young offense. They were kind of a year ahead of schedule by most folks' standards. LSU, on the other hand, man, came out of the gate sputtering. Did not look good. The Matt Canada as offensive coordinator experiment did not work. Ed Orgeron steps in. They come back and win that Auburn game, and it totally turns the season around. They end up having a good year. He installs Steven Ensminger as offensive coordinator in the offseason. They've now named Joe Burrow the starting quarterback, the Ohio State transfer. LSU, Miami, man, there's a lot of stuff to look at in this one, and it's in Dallas, which is kind of LSU's back door.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in Baton Rouge, but I got a feeling Miami fans will show up, and Canes fans are spread all over the country. Most people who live in Miami are transplants anyway. Jay, I love defense. And if you love defense, you need to tune into this game. You'll have two of the better defenses in the country going head-to-head. I mean, let's just take a look at Miami from last year. Miami last year had 31 takeaways with Manny Diaz at the helm as the DC. That's a lot of turnovers. They had the turnover chain and the swag. On top of that, Jay, the defensive line had 44 sacks last season. I know they're losing Trent Harris and Chad Thomas, but you still got Joe Jackson returning, and they're hoping for big things out of Gerald Willis, the Florida transfer in the middle. They have one of the best secondary groups with Shaq Quarterman, Michael Pinckey, and Zach McLeod. They have all four starters back on a defense that was solid last year, who got after the quarterback who turned the ball over. And LSU on the flip side of that, I mean, LSU's had a fantastic defense for the better part of a decade, probably a little bit longer than that. Let's be honest. Devon White is the heart of that defense. He had 133 tackles last year. He is a beast. He is mean, and he will be playing on Sunday soon. You also got another linebacker in Clavon Chasen, who's young, but everything I hear, Jay, that kid is a superstar in the making. You got Greedy Williams and John Battle anchoring a pass defense that was the 9th most efficient pass defense in all of college football. Both these teams play defense. Last year, LSU only gave up 19 points a game, 316 yards a game. They're stout on both sides of the line as far as both defensive lines are just fabulous. I think both of these defenses are going to get after it. What do you see the offenses being able to attack these strong defenses?
The big thing is, man, I think you've hit it. This is going to be a defensive battle all the way. Now, for LSU, it's going to be replacing Darius Geis at running back with a core of guys, and they've got a ton of them out there that they can utilize. They're going to have to find a good running game to lean on, and they're going to have to get some quarterback production out of Joe Burrow. I think that's been the big thing for LSU, right? Is that they can run the ball on everybody. But do they have a quarterback that can move the ball on 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, or 3rd and long and stuff like that? Danny Etling wasn't great, but he was kind of efficient. But he didn't really do anything that was super special, right? This year they got senior Nick Brissett coming in at running back. He's probably going to play some with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And then there's a freshman named Chris Curry and Tay Provins that are probably going to get in there. This is going to look, for me, kind of like a few years ago back when they had 4 or 5 guys that they could roll in there, and every Michael Ford and some of that crew where they could just come in with a different back on different sets to run at you. That's what LSU is going to try to do to attack you. For Miami, man, the thing is, their story is very similar. They got to get better quarterback play from what they had last year. They're Malik Rozier's their embattled incumbent coming back, and a lot of people thought, is he going to win the job again? Looks like he did, but they've got other guys there in the mix. They've got a freshman, they got another transfer student coming in, but most people think Rozier needs to take that next step. So here's the thing, the way these teams are going to try to attack, LSU lines up in the phone book and just tries to come straight at you. They're going to try to muscle you to death, which against that Miami D is going to be fun because Miami's D is really fast, right? But I don't know about size-wise how long they can take that kind of pounding because LSU's front's massive. Right, so LSU's going to try to bully them around. Miami, on the other hand, can run the ball well, but what they're more likely to do is to spread you out and then try to run between the tackles with the quarterback, with the back, get the ball out in space on some quick screens. And the thing about LSU's defense that people tend to forget is how good their DBs are, man. Look how many of their DBs are in the NFL right now, right? they're going to have to play up on those receivers, jam them, and try to take away some of those quick throws that turn into big plays like quick screens, quick hitches and stuff if they're going to be able to do anything. The one thing you can look at Miami's offense in the last part of the year when they fell apart, the turnovers on offense went through the roof. They started throwing interceptions. They started putting the ball on the turf. They do that against LSU, and that's going to be a problem because I'm going to tell you now, I think points are at a premium in this game, and I think extra possessions for another team is going to be what makes the difference.
I think you're exactly right. I expect this to be a really hard-fought battle. And I'll say this, Miami, their offensive line is not set right now, and they could be set to struggle early in the season. And against a fantastic LSU front seven, that is a recipe for disaster. But I'm going to give you two stats to really pay attention to. Miami's Achilles heel, Jay, last year was third down conversions on offense. They were awful at it. There was only one game where they were over 40% in a game, and that was the Florida State game. They really struggled to keep the chains moving, put their defense on the field a lot. And, that goes back to what you're talking about kind of when you're talking about Etling. Miami needs Malik Rozier to be able to make those 3rd and 8 throws to keep the chains moving, kind of bail you out when you did nothing on the first 2 downs. On the flip side of that, Jay, LSU was worst in the SEC in red zone percentage, only scoring 77% of the time. I think this is a entertaining game, especially if you like to watch defense. There are a lot of stars tomorrow. For LSU, my question is, how is Joe Burrows really going to play? I think Joe Burrows has potential to be a great player this year. I think it'll take him a couple of games to improve. I kind of harken back to Cam Newton. Cam Newton in that fantastic 2010 season, he played okay the first couple of games, but it wasn't until that South Carolina game, the 4th game of the year, he started hitting his stride. And last thing, Jay, LSU was not good in place kicking last year. There were 16 of 27 on field goals, and that's normally been a pretty steady place for LSU. So Jay, I'm just going to go ahead and pick it. I think this is going to be a tough, physical, hard-hitting game in Dallas. I like the Hurricanes to squeak out 23-20.
All right, so you've got Miami 23-20. Well, I think it's going to be closer than that, my man, in terms of points, because I just don't think there's going to be a lot of points in this one. And I got to tell you, I just have a hard time picking against the size, the strength, and the speed of an SEC defense. I know that may make me a homer, but I've seen what happens when Miami gets faced against a team like that. They haven't done well in several years. And last year, they got pushed around by Pitt. They got pushed around by Clemson, which is pretty much an SEC team. And then they got pushed around by Wisconsin, who is not an SEC team, but is a pretty good Big Ten team, or a really good Big Ten team, and not one known for speed. And they got blown off the field as part of that. That's last year, though. But coming up into this year, I still think LSU's got enough size and strength that they're going to be able to move the ball enough to get ahead. I've got LSU winning this one 13-10. So we disagree on the first one. You got Miami, and I've got LSU.
We both have a 3-point spread. I think it's going to be a fun game, and I think a turnover here or there is really going to make the difference when it comes down to it.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, again, giving another team an extra possession, that's going to be the difference, or going to kill a drive late. That red zone and third down statistic you read for LSU, absolutely dead on. They got to make improvements. I think they're going to do it. I know I'm the only one on this show that's holding the LSU flag still. Everybody else seems to think that they're just hot garbage, and it just smells that way just because of where they are, though, in Louisiana. So anyway, moving on to feature game number 2. This one's in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, right? Speaking of which, what a sweetheart deal Mercedes has got. They got 2 named stadiums in the same division in the NFL. That's kind of awesome, man. That's some money going on there. But speaking of money, you got 2 big-time teams representing their conferences. The Auburn Tigers out of the SEC taking on the Washington Huskies from the Pac-12. In the playoff 2 years ago, the Huskies, a lot of people putting a lot of emphasis on them this year to make a run. A lot of people think, man, this is the biggest game of the weekend because it's got playoff implications and all that. I just want to say, I think it's got playoff implications for one of the teams. I think if Washington loses this, it's going to hurt their out-of-conference chances and their schedule and their resume and stuff. They could run the rest of the table, but the committee might go, yeah, but you played an SEC team and look what happened, right? Auburn, on the other hand, could lose this game, and they still got to play like 700 ranked teams, 2 of them on the road. So Auburn has nothing to gain and only nothing to lose in this game. They can only gain by this one. So that's why this one is a featured game and not the game of the week. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's a battle of 2 top 10 teams. It's kind of the Western team versus the South. We don't get a lot of those SEC Pac-12 matchups. And you know what? I think everybody's excited. It's a fun way to kick off the season there in Atlanta. And that beautiful stadium Arthur Blank has built. Jay, how do you see this game playing out from an offensive standpoint?
Well, the things I'm looking at here, and we'll start with Washington on this one. Jake Browning coming back, senior year quarterback, super accurate. Right? I mean, yeah, he had a great sophomore season when they went to the playoffs, and then he's kind of dropped off because his receiving targets went down. But this guy right here it gets it done, man. I mean, he really can get it done throwing the ball. 68.5% completion percentage last year, only 5 picks against 19 touchdowns, 2,700 yards. I think he is the real deal at quarterback. He's super accurate. The thing for him is he's going to have to watch out for that pass rush, which I know you're going to talk about in just a bit. On the other hand, they've also got Myles Gaskin, a dazzling running back. Did you know this kid had 1,380 yards last year? 21 touchdowns. Average 6.2 a carry. I think this guy is just as good as any other back that you're going to find out there. And he's not the biggest guy in the world, man. He's only about a 200-pound, 5'10" guy, but he runs between the tackles, Alan. I think that's how Washington is going to have to get it done because, look, Auburn's going to come after him from a pass rush standpoint, so they are going to have to get it done by running the ball and taking some pressure off of Jake Browning and that running game. I think that or Jake Browning and that passing game. So Washington is going to try to attack Auburn by running the ball, but they're going to have to go down the field too, because if Auburn has got one big question on defense, it is their defensive backfield right now. Their DBs are a big question mark. So Washington's going to have to try to get it done by doing quick passes, running the ball well, and then going deep when they get the shot on a play action. Auburn offensively, Jarrett Stidham's got to carry the load behind 5 new starters on the offensive line. A new running back by committee approach. Now, look, it's been 9 years since Auburn didn't have a 1,000-yard back, so I'm sure they will eventually find a running back. But as we've noticed with Gus Malzahn's offenses, it usually takes them 2 or 3 games to get rolling and get started. And with a whole new O-line, a lot is going to be put on Stidham, and matching up against the defensive backfield of Washington is going to be tough because Auburn's got some intriguing but unproven wide receiver prospects. The thing we know for sure about Washington's defense is how good their back seven is, particularly their DBs. They got 4 DBs that are probably playing in the NFL. Jarrett Stidham's going to have to find a way to get throws in between them if Auburn is going to win.
Well, Jay, I'll pick up right where you left off. I'm going to start with the Washington defense, Jay. This is a group last year that gave up 16.1 points a game and only gave up 298 yards a game. They bring back 9 of their 11 starters and 11 of their top 14 tacklers. And the average only giving up 101 yards on the ground. This is a front seven led by Jalen Johnson and Ben Curvin, who've been rock solid the last few years. Even though the defensive line lost Vita Vea, they expect good things out of this. This is a line that's been able to hold its own for the most part. But I will tell you, Jay, this team has struggled a few times against big-time backs. I'm mainly looking at when they played Penn State with Saquon Barkley, Stanford with Bryce Love, and Alabama with Bo Scarborough. Those backs all had big days against an otherwise vaunted defense. The big thing, they bend but don't break. Last year, the secondary had 15 interceptions and only gave up 10 passing touchdowns. You can say what you want against, some average Pac-12 teams. That's still some solid stats. They're a very good defense, as we saw a couple of years ago when they played Alabama in the playoffs. Auburn, on the other hand, Jay, this may be Kevin Steele's best defense at Auburn, in my opinion. The line with Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, Dontavius Russell, those are just 3 guys who are going to get after you, who are going to stop the run. They gotta find some extra pass rush with the loss of Jeff Holland. I think T.D. Moultrie will bring that in. And while Auburn doesn't necessarily have star linebackers, Deshaun Davis and Darrell Williams have been rock solid for them. The secondary, that's where Auburn struggled last year as far as – I didn't know this, Jay. Do you know Auburn only had 6 interceptions last year? I
did, yeah.
And 2 of those came against Louisiana Monroe, and 2 of those came against Mississippi State. There were 10 games they did not have an interception in. So they're really hoping for big things out of Jamel Dean and Javaris Davis. They hope Denson and Tomlinson can hold down the safeties. The starters are probably okay, but it's the depth. They have a lack of proven depth, Jay, on that secondary. Now, as we know, if you have a heck of a pass rush, your secondary can be complete trash, and you still win Super Bowls. Looking at you, New York Giants, that can really take care of business. Now, I do want to make a couple of counterpoints to your offensive analysis here. I think Auburn, while they need Stidham to have a big game, given the fact that I told you that Washington has lost some games when teams have effectively run against them, the most important group for Auburn is the offensive line. It is a group that they are retooling, and they need them to be very solid all year if they want to have the season they want, if they want to win this game. Also having to replace Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway, they got some great guys out there. I love Asa Martin, the freshman. I watched him in high school, and I thought he was great. Can Asa Martin, Cam Petway carry the load and allow Stidham to make the passes he needs to make?
Well, see, and that's the real key is that offensive line is going to be tested incredibly up front because you got Greg Gaines on the defensive line for Washington who's going to come after him. And, again, I expect Chris Peterson and his defensive staff to really dial up some interesting stuff, to try and get in Stidham's face early because when he was pressured last year, that's when he struggled. I mean, look at the 2 games at the end of the year where Auburn got beat pretty bad. Georgia got after him, beat him down because they couldn't run the ball, and then UCF, of all teams, got after him and beat him because they couldn't run the ball, and they had some real fast pass rushers. So that's certainly going to be a big question for Auburn in this game. They're going to have to answer the bell from the offensive line standpoint. Washington, on the other hand, man, again, I know people, I did the size and speed comparison a minute ago, and I think it's true. Washington's not going to see anything as big and fast as Auburn's defensive line until they get back around to the playoff if they make it at the end of the year, or if they go to the Rose Bowl against a Big Ten team. So it's going to be a challenge for them. But having a quarterback with that many years of experience and a running back they can lean on, they know how to do stuff. And I read a great analysis of Chris Peterson's offense this summer on SB Nation. I can't remember which guy wrote it. It may have been Bill Connolly or Jason Kirk. But either way, they said the thing about Washington's offense is it is plain. There's nothing exotic about it at all. They just execute the heck out of what they do. They're just so good at their just standard formation, standard play, and they just come right at you, and they continually get yards, and they don't go away from what works for them. And that kind of consistency is going to matter. Now, I want to ask you this. Coaching matchup-wise, Chris Peterson, Gus Malzahn, both these guys are offensive wonderkins or have come up that way in college. Which team has the coaching advantage?
Ooh, that is a real tough one. I mean, I would say Chris Peterson and Gus Malzahn are probably a push. I would think I'd have to give Auburn an overall edge. I like Kevin Steele. That guy knows how to coach some defense. He's proven it time and time again. And that's what's really been carrying Auburn because for the last couple of years, they haven't been so great on the offense. It's been that salty defense that Muschamp started, that Kevin Steele has continued, that's really kept them in there. And, kind of another counterpoint, I look back and there are a couple of losses that Washington's had over the past couple of years, Jay, that were kind of head scratchers. A loss to Washington State, and then a loss to Arizona a couple of years ago. And you know what the common theme in that, and including the Peach Bowl against Alabama? They did not break 100 yards running the ball. Is that a good recipe against a team like Auburn whose front seven is built to stuff the run? I don't think so.
It definitely could be. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give my pick, and then you can give yours. I think we're in for another defensive game. I think the offenses may move the ball between the 30s, but then it's going to stall out when they get into the green and the red zones of the other teams. I think special teams is going to play a huge role in this, and Auburn replacing their kicker is a big thing for me. I know Andres Carlson, Daniel Carlson's younger brother, is supposed to be just as good, but he's a freshman, so it's new to him. This is all going to be new. It's going to be a lot on him, and also the punting game. Auburn struggled with the punting game, and another thing, Auburn hasn't returned a kick for a touchdown in several seasons. being able to flip the field position with a good kick return or a punt return is going to matter in this game. Washington's had guys that have done that. Now, they're replacing Dante Pettis, who was that guy last year, but they've got guys in the wings that have done it before, and Chris Peterson teams tend to excel at that. I think this game is going to come down to which team can battle the nerves the best. Both of them have a lot to prove. They have a lot they want to try to do and make a statement. But I think Washington has heard all summer and all fall long now about how they're not going to be able to match up in this. It's too far away. They're not going to be able to handle the speed and the size of the defense. I think that is a recipe for Chris Peterson to come in and snag one from somebody, coupled with the fact that Gus Malzahn's teams at Auburn start slow offensively. And there's history to back that up. I think you've got the recipe for Washington to come in and get the upset win. I've got Washington winning this one 16-13 over Auburn. What do you say?
Jay, you and I are both kind of along the same line of thinking there. I'll jump onto the Carlson bandwagon there. Auburn also had a couple of kicks blocked over the past couple of years that kind of show some deficiencies in their field goal protection unit. I think the big thing is Auburn's offensive line is a work in progress. I think the lack of the running game in this first game could really hurt them. And the slow starts under Gus. It is well documented and well bemoaned by Auburn fans. I like Washington by a similar score, 19-13.
All right, so we've both got Washington. You've got them 19-13. I've got them 16-13 in the battle in Atlanta for the feature game too. So it's time to get to game of the week, Alan. And it's Michigan at Notre Dame. The rivalry renewed, finally. I'm glad to see this one back on the docket. And I think both of these teams, talk about have to have this game, not only for resume status, but just to get their seasons off to a start. Teams that ended last year with some questions, that have done a lot to rebuild in the offseason, a lot of expectations for both of them. What do you see between Michigan and Notre Dame as we head into this big game?
Well, I'm going to start with Michigan. Jay, Michigan's going to have an incredible defensive line that runs 8 or 9 deep. It's anchored by Rashawn Gary, who's the number 1 overall recruit a couple of years ago, and he is living up to the hype. He is set for a huge breakout year. And while his stats weren't necessarily flashy, how many defensive tackles have flashy stats? But he did what he had to do, and he really disrupted other offenses. You have Chase Winovich, who had 8.5 sacks last year. And this is a defense that, despite the fact they only returned 2 starters last year, Jay, they were a top 10 defense. Don Brown has done a great job. In the 26 games he's been in Michigan, he's only allowed 400 yards of total offense twice, and he's held teams under 300 yards 16 times. The main concern is going to be the safeties. They're breaking in some new safeties, and they blitz a lot in this defensive scheme that Brown runs, which can leave your safeties in one-on-one coverage, and they got beat a couple of times last year pretty badly. They feel like they brought some pieces in to address that. Michigan just gets after you. It's not like there's one guy there who destroys you. If you watch their defensive line, it's like somebody trying to stop a wave with a cardboard box. It just doesn't end up very well. They led the NCAA with 114 tackles for loss last year. That defense is solid. If I had to say there was one area of, concern, it would be the secondary, because I think the front seven are going to be as good as there is in the country. On the flip side of that, Notre Dame is returning 9 starters from a defense that finished in the top 10 last year. Their front seven is going to be incredibly strong, anchored by Jerry Tillery and Taven Coney. The back end is still a concern, Jay. A Notre Dame safety did not record an interception last year. Not to say that they were awful. They only gave up, I think they were 15th in pass efficiency defense last year. But they didn't make the big plays. They didn't have the drive killers. And I think they allowed teams to dink and dunk them. I think both of these defenses are pretty salty. How are the offenses really going to be able to attack these defenses? Because let's be honest, both teams, for better or worse, have kind of struggled offensively over the past couple of years.
Yeah, they have. And for Michigan, it's been the fact that they just have had no identity at quarterback. And now Shea Patterson, the transfer from Ole Miss, should be a step forward in that direction. Now, they took a hit this week. Tariq Black, one of their starting wide receivers, had a foot injury, going to be out for a few weeks, so that's going to be a problem. Here's the thing, though, for Patterson. What he never had at Ole Miss was a good running game. What's Michigan always had? A good running game, particularly under Harbaugh. Karen Higdon, Chris Evans as the platoon running backs there against that great offensive line. They're going to do really well. Here's the guy on Michigan's offense, though, who's also plays special teams for him that's going to be a key guy. Donovan Peoples-Jones was a big get when they signed him as a freshman, made an impact immediately. He needs to take a step forward, and he's going to be their go-to guy to attack that Notre Dame defense, particularly that secondary. If they can get him deep, and Patterson's got the arm to do it, that could be some big plays. For Notre Dame, man, it's going to be all about Brandon Wimbush, and can he move forward and just not be a runner? I mean, as a runner, he's unbelievable, man, and he's got a great set of running backs, But with Tony Jones Jr., Dexter Williams, Jafar Armstrong, there's a good platoon of guys behind him, and they've got good receivers. But the thing is, Wimbush has not established himself as a consistent thrower. At times, he was under 50% throwing. You can't be that in an offense, particularly the Brian Kelly offense. It's all about accuracy. So Notre Dame, the problem is the best thing they do is run, but against a tough front like Michigan's got, that means they need to throw to set up the run, and I don't know if they can do it, man. I mean, based on last year, doesn't look too good.
Well, let me ask you, can Shea Patterson, who's been in really a spread system, can he thrive in the Harbaugh pro-style system?
I think if they use him to his skills right, yeah, because that's like you take these spread guys and then they go to the NFL and stuff. Shea Patterson's got a live arm. Now, he can run a little bit, but he mostly operates out of the shotgun. So it's just all about how you deploy him in certain situations. Harbaugh and his staff are smart enough to know how to use him. So, yeah, I do think he can work because he was a stud coming out of high school. Again, has a great arm and is really accurate. And I think that's the big thing about Patterson. He can look down the field. They're teaching him the throws. He's been there. He's been in the system. He's won the team over. He's won the starting job. The team seems to be behind him. So, yeah, I think he is the kind of guy that can thrive in it. So let's get to some picks, man. Who do you think's going to win between Michigan and Notre Dame?
Well, Notre Dame last year only allowed 57% completion percentage on passing against them. They were 110th in passing last year as a team. This should be a tremendous defensive game. In that, I like the team that maybe has a little bit more of an ability to score more. And I haven't seen Wimbush successfully throw the ball. And for Shea Patterson and all his faults, with his turnovers, now granted those were on some bad Ole Miss offensive lines, but he's made some mistakes. He gives the chance for more explosive plays, not to mention Notre Dame's lost its top two backs, top three wide receivers, and its best two offensive linemen for last year. I like Michigan to win this one 24-17.
I like Michigan in this one as well. I'll go ahead and say it. I think they are the better all-around team. I think they've got more upside at the quarterback position. I think it's a little bit closer, though. I do think they're going to play things close to the vest. Without that receiver, it's going to make a difference. But I think the difference in the game is actually not going to be Patterson. It's going to be that Peoples-Jones kid. I've got Michigan winning 24-21 over Notre Dame to kick off week one. Well, it's time for our lightning round, Alan, and for what we do here, we pick a winner score and one statement and reason why, so let's run down the lightning round. Colorado is taking on Colorado State in Denver, Colorado. The Rams look lost against Hawaii, man, and Colorado should be improved. I've got the Buffaloes in this one 23-20. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, that was an awful showing against Hawaii. I think you're really seeing kind of some of the missing of Mike Bobo with his health issues. I think Colorado gets it. I think it'll be a tight game first half. I like Colorado at 38-17.
All right, third game on the list here. We go for some ACC action. Virginia Tech travels to Tallahassee to take on Florida State.
I think Virginia Tech lost too much on defense, as we discussed in the previous show. FSU has a lot of talent. They're invigorated by the arrival of a new coach in Willie Taggart. I think FSU gets the win 27-17.
I like FSU here as well. Willie Taggart starts off with a big ACC win, just a better overall team right now. I've got them winning 24-13. All right, Louisville takes on Alabama in Orlando, Florida, Camping World Stadium. My question is, will Louisville even score against the first team? I think this is blowout city. I've got Alabama winning 35-6.
Bama, their secondary is a work in progress. I think they may give up a few big plays. And I know they're not settled at quarterback, but I think they could roll out a Kenmore washing machine and still win this game with that running attack and offensive line. I like Alabama 45-17.
Yeah, Alabama could roll out the Kenmore, but remember the Whirlpool had that great half in the national championship game, so don't forget about him. Next game up, Tennessee taking on West Virginia in Charlotte, North Carolina. Will Grier, I think, is going to have a field day against a rebuilding Tennessee D. The thing is Tennessee's West Virginia's defense might make Tennessee's offense look good, and it's not going to be, but I think West Virginia is going to win. I've got them winning 34-24 over Tennessee.
Jeremy Pruitt's a great coach. I kind of feel bad for him. He got himself a decent job with an awful schedule. Will Grier will eat his lunch this week. I like West Virginia 42-17.
All right, and then the last one in the lightning round, Florida Atlantic taking on Oklahoma. The Fighting Lane Kiffins traveling on the road. Can they get it done?
This is the Super Bowl for Florida Atlantic. If they lose this game, they can still obtain all their goals as far as winning CUSA, which is an awful conference. But a win would be enormous for Lane Kiffin and his aspirations for future jobs. I think Kyler Murray and company will be able to move the ball. I think it'll be a fun, exciting game. I think FAU keeps it close for 3 quarters, Jay. But give me the Sooners 48-31.
I agree with everything you said. I think they keep it close for a while. Going to be a lot of points in this one, but in the end, Oklahoma's deeper, more talented, and I think Rodney Anderson, that running back, is going to have a big day. It's going to be the day of the running back, actually. Rodney Anderson versus Devin Singletary from FAU. Check that one out, but I've got Oklahoma winning 45-37. Well, we're done with the lightning round, which can only mean one thing, Alan. It's time to take us to the danger zone.
Yes, Jay, it is time for the Danger Zone once again, and I plan to buzz the tower. I plan to shake things up this week. Jay, I'm throwing you a curveball. I didn't tell you about this game. I'm taking us back down to Troy, Alabama, Jay. Now, for any of our listeners who haven't been in South Alabama in late August, early September, let them know a little bit about the weather.
It is ridiculously hot and unbelievably humid, and Troy Stadium is in a ditch. I mean, so it just locks in humidity.
Now, let me ask you, do you know what the humidity in Boise, Idaho was today?
I would guess around 45%.
No, it was 10%.
Let me guess what it was in Troy. 90?
Yeah, it's probably close to it. I think it was in the 70s or 80s. The kickoff, it's going to be 85 degrees with 70% humidity. While it will get cooler, the humidity will only kick up. I think that plays in Troy's favor. I think those boys are used to it. And while they're not the more talented team, something in my gut tells me they're going to pull off another big win, just like they did in Baton Rouge last year. Give me those Trojans, 27-24.
Wow, our friend Barry McKnight would be very excited to hear that. If I was picking on this, and I don't pick on the Danger Zone picks, but I would only disagree because I think Boise State is the best Group of 5 team. Sorry, Lane Kiffin, in the country, and they could actually run the table. I think they'll find a way to get the win. To counteract that, I read a real cool story. Their training staff, to try to simulate the humidity, took them to their indoor practice facility, cranked the heat up to 90, and wet the field to try to simulate not only the conditions, but then how they would counteract it as a training staff. So I think they're aware of it. But that's a very interesting Danger Zone pick, and I'm glad you threw that one out there to start the season. So, man, I'm ready for week 1 of college football. We'll be back next week. We'll briefly review how we did this week, and then we'll take a look at the games of week 2. But any other thoughts on week 1 before we wrap it up?
No, man, I'm just ready for it to get here. I'm ready for all day Saturday to eat massive amounts of chicken wings and watch football.
Man, I'm ready to watch some ball as well, and I hope you all are too. Folks, thanks again for joining us on the show. Please share and review our show. Subscribe, and you can find us on iTunes, on Stitcher. If you're listening on the Spreaker app, we appreciate it. Let other people know about it. We appreciate the support. Until next time, for Alan, I'm Jay. You've been listening to the Gridiron Breakdown.
Thank you for listening to the Gridiron Breakdown. Tune in next week for another show. The information discussed in the Gridiron Breakdown is for entertainment purposes only and is not officially connected with the NCAA or any other college football teams discussed.